My son wouldn't accept any nanny until he met her. Before we begin, I want to give you a special invitation. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I'd love to get to know you better and see how far these stories are reaching. And if you love emotional love stories filled with drama and heart-touching endings, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss a single chapter and you'll be helping this space grow and bring even more stories made just for you. Michael's separation felt like the breaking of something he never thought could shatter. It was the beginning of autumn in Seattle when Claire, his wife, packed a small suitcase, put on her coat, and announced she was leaving. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She just said, her voice far too cold for someone who once promised eternal love, "I can't live this life anymore. I can't be a mother anymore. I can't be a wife. I need to go." Michael stood frozen at the door, holding Mason in his arms, feeling the weight of his son and of everything he was about to lose. He tried to respond, tried to ask for an explanation, but all he managed to whisper was, "Claire, why? What happened? Tell me what I did." She looked away and closed the door behind her, as if sealing off any chance of return. The sound of the lock echoed through the house, and that silence settled in never to leave. That night, Mason cried until he fell asleep. Michael walked around with him in his arms, trying to soothe him, his chest tightening more with every step. "I'm here, son. Daddy's here," he whispered, even though he himself could barely stay on his feet. The house, once full of conversation, the smell of morning coffee and plans for the future, now felt cavernous, empty, as if even the walls were mourning the loss. The days that followed blurred into a series of automatic functions. He'd take Mason to preschool, work from home, and rush to make dinner before the little one started asking about his mother again. And when he did, it always hurt. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming back?" Michael swallowed the bitter truth and said, She needs some time, but I'm here with you." The boy accepted it, not because he believed it, but because he trusted his father. And that made it hurt even more. At night, Michael would lie awake staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the sudden abandonment. He'd relive old arguments, happy moments, trying to spot signs he might have missed. But nothing made sense. He couldn't understand how someone could leave their child like that, and that thought was a constant blow. Over time, a new fear began to grow. The fear of getting attached. The fear of love. He became too cautious, too reserved, unable to imagine sharing his life with someone again. When coworkers suggested dates, he'd just offer a tight-lipped smile. "It's not for me." It wasn't just the pain. It was the guilt. The feeling that if he messed up again, Mason would be the one to pay the price. He poured himself into his son, his work, and his routine, building invisible walls to keep from being hurt again. Inside him, love had stopped being a safe haven and turned into hostile territory, a place he swore never to step into again. Yet, watching Mason play on the living room rug, whisper his name, ask him to come see a new cartoon, Michael felt a quiet sting. A part of him still believed life could bring something good. Not something perfect, but something real. Something that could heal him even if he wasn't ready to admit it. And it was exactly then, when he thought his life was only about being a father and a survivor, that fate stepped in. Discreetly, almost imperceptibly, like someone moving a piece on a chessboard without anyone noticing. The proof was coming. And with it, everything he feared the most and everything he needed to find again. Michael believed that, after Claire's departure, things would eventually find some kind of balance. But reality proved to be crueler than he imagined. The first nanny came recommended by a coworker, a calm-looking older lady with a warm smile named Margaret. She had gray hair pulled back into a low bun and firm hands that showed her experience with children. However, when she stepped into the room, Mason watched her with wide eyes, clutching his teddy bear tightly against his chest. As soon as she tried to approach, he ran behind his father's legs, crying uncontrollably. Seeing the boy's reaction, Margaret tried to be patient, but at the end of the day she handed over the keys and said gently, "He needs someone special, Michael, someone he can learn to trust again. And I'm not that person." The second failure came even faster. The new nanny, Ashley, was young, studying child psychology, and had vibrant red hair that matched her enthusiasm. But when she tried to play with Mason, he pushed the toys away and repeated in a trembling voice, "I don't want it. I don't want it." Ashley knelt in front of him, trying to talk, but the boy began to tremble and grabbed the collar of his shirt as if he were choking. When she left that evening, she told Michael sadly, "It's not his fault, but I just can't reach your son's heart." The third nanny lasted only 5 hours. The fourth, 2 days. The fifth never even got to meet Mason when he heard unfamiliar footsteps in the living room. He locked himself in his room and refused to come out. With every failed attempt, Michael carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. At night, he would sit beside his son's bed, watching the light brown hair spread over the pillow, his gentle breathing, his innocent face carrying more pain than a child should ever know. He would softly touch the top of Mason's head and whisper, "I promise I'll never let anyone hurt you again." But no matter how many promises he made, Mason's fear only worsened. He grew more withdrawn each day, reacted with silence to new people, and even at school, his teacher, Miss Palmer, expressed concern. "Michael, he's very smart, but he doesn't talk to anyone. He participates in activities, but it's like he's always expecting something bad to happen, as if he's defending himself from something invisible." Those words pierced through Michael. He went home with a crushing weight in his chest. He made dinner, cleaned up the toys, tucked Mason into bed, and then sat in the hallway, head in his hands, trying to hold back the overwhelming feeling of failure. The house was quiet, but it wasn't ordinary quiet. It was the kind of silence filled with stories, pain, and memories that refused to fade. Later, with the lights off, Michael stepped into his son's room and walked slowly toward the bed. The moonlight pouring through the window lit up Mason's face. Michael knelt beside him and took a deep breath, struggling against the emotion rising in his throat. "Son, I'm trying. I wish you could trust someone again. I wish you could smile again. I'd do anything for you." For a moment, he wondered what it would be like to truly understand what was going on in his child's mind. The fear of being abandoned, the trauma still echoing, the inability to believe any new adult would be different from the mother who left him. It was a deep wound, and Michael felt guilty for not being able to heal it. In the following days, he tried 2 more nannies. Both gave up. One of them left a simple note on the kitchen table. "He's not ready." Maybe no child would be after what he's been through. Those words hit Michael straight in the heart. He sat at the table with the note between his fingers and felt his breath catch. The fear of completely failing became almost unbearable. He thought maybe it was best to stop trying to get help. Maybe he had to do it all on his own to avoid putting Mason through more pain. But when he looked at his son playing alone on the living room rug, drawing colorless shapes with a blank expression, something inside Michael shifted. He realized that if he gave up, he wouldn't be protecting Mason. He would be reinforcing his fear, pushing him even further away from the chance to trust again. And that sparked something small but powerful inside him. One last try. One last hope. That night, as he turned off the lights in the living room, Michael whispered to himself, a mix of desperation and determination in his voice, "I don't know how, but I will find the right person, even if it's the last thing I do." What he didn't know was that this person was about to appear, and their arrival would change everything in a way he could never have imagined. The morning after the latest failure, Michael had made up his mind he wouldn't try again. But his neighbor, Mrs. Harris, insisted he meet someone she knew from her volunteer work at the community library. He was exhausted, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights, but he agreed, if only not to seem rude. At exactly 3 in the afternoon, Michael heard a soft knock at the door. He took a deep breath, bracing for another disappointment, and opened it. That's when Olivia Bennett appeared on the doorstep, holding a slim folder against her chest. She looked to be around 25, with fair skin, platinum blonde hair falling in waves to her shoulders, and gray-blue eyes that held an uncommon serenity. She wore a beige coat, dark jeans, and a gentle smile that seemed to light up the room before she even entered. Her presence wasn't forced or overbearing. It felt natural, almost familiar. Like a warm breeze drifting into a winter that had felt endless. Michael tried to keep his guard up, crossing his arms as he invited her in. "Thank you for coming, Olivia. I don't want to get my hopes up." She looked around the tidy living room, toys neatly stacked, and an atmosphere heavy with silence. Her gaze rested on him, steady but kind. "I understand. And I'm not expecting miracles. I just want to meet your son and see what I can offer." There was something different about her. No dramatics, no pity, just sincerity. Michael felt it the moment she stepped farther into the room. He swallowed his anxiety, but something inside him stirred, a strange feeling, as if his body was warning him that something significant was about to happen. Olivia sat on the couch while Michael explained Mason's recent history. She listened silently, without interrupting or looking away. When he finished, she took a deep breath and said, "It sounds like he's been through a lot. Kids feel more than they can explain. But when they find someone who respects their pace, everything can change." Those words cut through Michael in a way he hadn't expected. He found himself locked into her calm gaze, feeling his chest tighten. He quickly looked away, adjusting his watch, trying to recover the cold composure he'd promised himself he would maintain. "Olivia, I just need you to know he's very sensitive and very distrustful." She tilted her head, offering a subtle smile. "I used to be a distrustful child too, Michael." That quiet confession struck something deep in him. He almost asked more but stopped himself. He couldn't get involved. He shouldn't. When he called Mason into the room, the boy came slowly. His light brown hair was messy, and he clutched his worn-out teddy bear like a shield. Michael held his breath, expecting the same panic he'd seen so many times before. But Olivia didn't move toward him. She didn't force a smile. She didn't reach out. She remained sitting on the floor at a comfortable distance, pulling a few colored pencils and a small notebook from her bag. "Hi, Mason. I promise I won't touch you or ask for anything. I'm just going to draw right here, okay?" Mason watched her for a few seconds, still wary. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't run. He didn't cry. He just stood there, observing. Michael's heart started to race. He even stepped forward slightly, unconsciously, as if witnessing something impossible. Olivia began drawing something simple, a cat, then a car, then a little house. The silence was soft, not heavy. The kind of silence that invited, not scared away. Mason took a few hesitant steps, slowly getting closer without her noticing. Until he quietly said, "That car looks like my dad's." Michael felt the air leave his lungs. Olivia looked up slowly and smiled at Mason. "Really? Do you think I can draw one just like his? You can tell me if I get it right." Mason nodded slightly, sitting down near her, still holding his bear. Michael leaned against the wall to keep from losing his balance. This wasn't normal. It wasn't expected. It wasn't possible. But it was happening right in front of him. Olivia looked up for a moment and met Michael's gaze. There was something there. Something he hadn't felt in years. A warmth he hadn't invited in. A presence that slipped past his defenses. He tried to regain control and murmured, his voice tight, I don't know what's happening right now." She gave him a soft, almost knowing smile. "I think your son was just waiting for someone who speaks the same language as him." A knot formed in Michael's throat. It was hope, but laced with fear. Fear of believing again. Fear of getting close. Fear of losing. He turned his face so she wouldn't see the emotion rising. He couldn't let himself feel anything for her. Not now. Not after everything. But when Olivia chuckled softly at Mason's attempt to point out the real car through the window, Michael knew something inside him, something he thought had died, was beginning to breathe again. And that terrified him in a way he wasn't ready to face. Michael couldn't take his eyes off the scene unfolding in the living room, but when he saw Mason relax next to Olivia, something inside him asked for silence, for space. Olivia noticed how tired the boy looked and gently asked, "Can I see your room, Mason?" "Only if you want to." He hesitated, hugging his teddy bear to his chest, but eventually nodded. It was almost imperceptible, but it was a yes. Michael stood still as Olivia rose, following Mason with careful steps down the hallway. Each step she took held such deep respect for that child that even the air seemed lighter. When the two disappeared into the bedroom, Michael slowly walked after them, stopping near the doorway where he could see without being seen. Mason's room was small, with a light wood bed, a shelf full of toy cars, and drawings taped to the wall with colorful tape. Mason lingered near the bed, watching Olivia enter. She didn't turn on the light, she simply opened the curtain a bit more to let in the last of the afternoon light. Once inside, she did something unexpected. She sat down on the floor, crossed her legs, and set the folder beside her without pushing anything forward. "You like this place, don't you?" she said softly, her eyes on the drawings taped to the wall. Her voice had a tone that felt like a gentle caress in the air. It didn't intrude. Mason clutched his bear and answered in a whisper, "It's where I go when I don't want to talk." Olivia tilted her head, showing no pity, only understanding. "Everyone needs a place like that. I had one too when I was little." Michael held his breath. That simple, honest confession seemed crafted to reach Mason's heart, and it did. The boy took 2 slow steps toward her, then one more. Olivia didn't move. She just waited. Mason sat on the rug at a safe but present distance. "You didn't talk to anyone either?" he asked. Olivia smiled, looking down at her own hands. "Sometimes the world is just too loud. I could only breathe when it was quiet." Mason stared at the floor, taking in every word. Michael, in the hallway, felt a wave of emotion surge through him. He had never seen his son react to anyone like this, not with this calm, this openness, this sense of being understood. Then something happened that Michael never imagined he'd witness so soon. Mason placed his teddy bear to the side and slowly pushed it toward Olivia. It was a small gesture, but for him, it meant the world. Olivia looked at the bear, surprised, and whispered, "He looks really important to you." Mason nodded. "He's been with me since Mommy left." The silence that followed was deep. Olivia gently placed her fingertips on the floor, as if grounding herself to not let the boy's pain knock her down. "I promise I'll take good care of him if you want me to hold him for a little while." Mason took a deep breath and pushed the bear closer. Olivia picked it up carefully, as if receiving something sacred. "Thank you for trusting me." Michael felt his chest tighten in a way he didn't know was possible. There was tenderness in Olivia's expression, a kind he hadn't seen since never. She didn't just understand how Mason felt, she felt it with him. It was unlike anything anyone else had ever tried to do. Without realizing it, Michael gripped the doorframe tightly, as if it might keep his heart from showing too much. But his body betrayed what he was trying to hide. He was stuck in that moment, unable to move, witnessing the most unexpected scene of his life. Olivia continued talking with Mason, holding the teddy bear like something precious. And Michael, watching her, realized something that terrified him. It was the gentleness with which she touched the boy's emotions, the patience, the care. It was how she turned a quiet bedroom into a safe haven. And then he understood. She wasn't just reaching his son. She was opening a door inside him that he had sworn would stay locked forever. Michael took a step back, the floor seeming narrower beneath his feet. His chest rose and fell harder than it should. He needed to get a grip. He had to. But when Olivia let out a soft laugh because Mason asked her to draw something in her notebook, Michael knew it was already too late. Something unexplainable had begun. Something he feared just as much as he longed for. And for the first time in a long time, he had no idea how to stop his own heart from giving in. In the days that followed, Michael's house began to change in ways that were almost imperceptible at first, but impossible to ignore as time passed. The heavy silence that had once filled every room began to lose its grip. First came the soft footsteps of Olivia in the mornings, then the sound of pencils sketching across paper as she and Mason drew together. And finally, something Michael had forgotten how to hear: laughter. Genuine, spontaneous, full of life. One afternoon, he came home from work early. As he opened the door, the aroma of fresh pasta filled the air. In the kitchen, he found Olivia wearing a light blue apron tied around her waist, and Mason standing on a stool, trying to stir the sauce with a large spoon. The sunlight pouring through the window caught in Olivia's blonde hair, casting a soft glow that made the scene even warmer. Mason looked up and waved excitedly. "Daddy, I'm making dinner." Olivia laughed, gently wiping a bit of sauce from the boy's forehead. "He's a great helper. Definitely has a future in the kitchen." Michael stood there for a moment, watching the two of them, emotion rising in his chest. It felt too good to be real, too good not to hurt a little. He stepped closer and tried to keep his tone neutral. "This looks amazing. I think you two are becoming quite the team." Olivia looked at him with a shy but genuine smile. "He makes everything easier." Mason stayed focused on the sauce, but Michael noticed Olivia glance away briefly, as if hiding something. He felt a strange tension inside, a quiet unrest. Not fear, not exactly. Something deeper. Something he was trying to suppress before it even had a name. That night, after Mason had fallen asleep, Michael came downstairs and found Olivia gathering some drawings scattered across the rug. She bent down and a lock of hair fell over her face. Instinctively, she tucked it behind her ear with a delicate gesture that made Michael look away for a moment, trying to hide how deeply it affected him. He walked over and helped collect the papers. "You've made such a difference in his life, Olivia," he said quietly. She looked up slowly. "He's the one making the difference in mine. I've never met a child so kind even after everything he's been through." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was filled with something neither of them dared to name. When their hands met reaching for the same drawing, they both froze. They didn't pull away right away. They didn't move. They just stayed there, skin brushing, breath caught, the air thickening between them. Olivia was the first to pull back, swallowing hard. "Sorry. I didn't mean to cross any lines." Michael shook his head too quickly. "There's nothing to apologize for." He tried to seem calm, but his heart was pounding. It was absurd how even the smallest gesture from her could undo him. On another evening, as she slipped on a light jacket before leaving, he caught the soft scent she always wore, something between vanilla and wildflowers, so subtle it seemed made just for her. "See you tomorrow, Michael," she said, her expression carrying more than the words aloud. He replied, "See you tomorrow," but his voice came out rougher than intended, betraying what he was trying to hide. Olivia paused for a second before opening the door, as if wanting to say something, but changed her mind. He noticed, and it rattled him more than it should have. When she left, the house was quiet again, but not the same emptiness as before. This silence was full of possibilities, full of unsaid things. Michael leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair, trying to quiet the storm inside. "This isn't right," he muttered to himself. "She's here for Mason, not for me." But the truth he didn't want to admit was that with each passing day, he looked forward to every minute she was around. And worse, he feared what would happen if she decided to leave. The growing affection, the trust Mason was building, the way Olivia fit into that house like she belonged there, it was all taking root. Deep, dangerous roots, but also inevitable ones. And with every glance she gave him, every shy smile, every accidental touch they both pretended not to notice, Michael felt that something was about to overflow. Something that could change everything, forever. What he didn't realize was that this something was closer than he thought. The late afternoon had settled peacefully, the scent of home-cooked food still lingering in the kitchen. Mason played on the rug in the living room while Olivia quietly arranged books on the shelf. Michael had just taken off his coat when the doorbell rang. It wasn't delivery time. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, the air left his lungs. Claire was standing there. The ex-wife who had vanished without explanation now stood before him with the same beautiful face. Though paler, her eyes slightly sunken, her dark brown hair tied back in a hurried ponytail. She wore a dark coat and scarf, looking like she'd run to get there. Her expression was a strange mix of urgency and forced softness. "Michael, we need to talk." He froze. A flood of memories hit him so hard his hands began to sweat. "Why are you here?" His voice came out steady, but inside, he was shaking. Before he could stop her, Claire stepped forward, letting her gaze wander across the room, analyzing a space that no longer belonged to her. When her eyes landed on Olivia, who had paused mid-motion by the shelf, something flickered behind them. Surprise and discomfort. "I see you didn't waste any time," Claire said, raising a brow with sarcasm. Olivia, trying to remain composed, instinctively took a step back. She hadn't expected to be caught in something so personal. "I'm Mason's nanny," she said gently, trying to avoid confrontation. Claire gave a humorless smile. "Of course, the nanny." The air turned thick with tension. Michael took a deep breath, holding back the chaos rising inside him. "You can't just show up like this. Mason's not ready for this." Claire crossed her arms and exhaled slowly, as if preparing a rehearsed speech. "I want shared custody." The words hit Michael like a punch. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. "What? Claire, you left. You walked out on our son. You disappeared." "I needed time," she said, her voice wavering between defensiveness and calculation. "And now I'm ready to be a mother again. You're ready?" Michael took a step forward, disbelief etched in every feature. "Do you even know what he's been through? What he's lived through since you left?" Claire didn't meet his eyes, but her chin remained high. "He needs his mother. And from what I'm seeing, you're not managing it alone." The implication was cruel. Olivia flinched ever so slightly, like she, too, had been struck. Michael noticed. And watching Olivia suffer for something she had no part in lit a fire in him he didn't know he still had. "Don't you dare imply I'm not taking care of our son," he said, voice low, brittle with the pressure of self-control. He's better now than he's been in a long time, and you have no idea what that means. Claire's eyes flicked toward Olivia, measuring her, testing the threat. He's attached to her, isn't he? Kids confuse care with other things. Olivia went cold. It wasn't just an accusation. It was an emotional violation. She looked down, breathing deeply to hold herself together. Michael saw it immediately. His heart clenched. He took a half step toward Olivia as if to shield her, but stopped himself. Not now. Not in front of Claire. Don't speak about her like that, he said, voice steadier than he felt. Olivia is here to help Mason. That's all. But as he said it, his voice faltered. That's all? He knew it wasn't true. He felt more, and Olivia knew it too. She looked up just for a moment, and in her eyes he saw it all. The pain, the fear, the longing, and the guilt. Claire saw it too. And it gave her a bitter kind of satisfaction. Then I'll see you in court, she said, adjusting her coat with a frozen smile. I want to make this official. When she finally turned and walked out the door, dragging her familiar storm of emotional wreckage behind her, Michael's knees nearly gave out. He shut his eyes and took a long, unsteady breath, trying to process the explosion she had left behind. When he turned around, Olivia stood frozen, still holding one of Mason's drawings. Her eyes were wet, though she tried to hide it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here right now. This is between you two. What are you talking about? Michael stepped toward her, but Olivia took a step back. I don't want to get in the way, Michael. I don't want to be a problem. Her voice trembled, and it nearly broke him. I know this is a part of your life that I don't belong to. His chest tore open. Olivia, that's not true. She forced a sad smile. It is, and that's okay. I have to remember what my place is here. Michael opened his mouth to say anything, but the words died the moment he saw the pain in her eyes. Pain he never wanted to cause. Pain he didn't know how to heal. And in that exact moment, he realized something that shook his foundation. It wasn't just the fear of losing custody of Mason that was tearing him apart. It was the fear of losing Olivia before he ever really had her. Michael had spent the whole night awake after Claire's devastating visit. He paced through the living room in silence, hands trembling, replaying every word his ex-wife had said. Earlier that day, the lawyer had been clear, cold, and brutally objective. Any emotional involvement between him and Olivia, even if unspoken, could be used against him in court. Her very presence in the house, now that Claire was willing to twist anything she could, might become ammunition to claim instability. It was unfair, absurdly unfair, but real. And he knew what he had to do. When Olivia arrived the next morning, her hair tied in a simple ponytail, her beige coat wrapped around her slender frame, she brought with her the same gentle smile as always. Mason ran to her, happier than he was with anyone else. She hugged him carefully, brushing a hand through his hair. "Good morning, champ." Michael watched the scene, his stomach twisting. Mason's joy made everything even crueler. When Olivia lifted her eyes and met his, her smile faded. She could immediately sense something was wrong. Michael, what happened? He drew a deep breath. His heart was beating too fast, his hands were cold. "We need to talk." She hung her coat on the rack gently, as if preparing herself to hear the truth required physical effort. "Okay, tell me." He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for strength. "I talked to the lawyer yesterday about Claire's visit." Olivia remained still. She just waited, her eyes attentive and vulnerable. "He said that to avoid complicating the custody case, I need." His voice broke. He closed his eyes for a second, forcing himself to continue. I need you to stay away from the house for a while. Her reaction was immediate. Her shoulders curled, her face paled. She tried to hide it, but she couldn't. Away from you too? Michael nodded, though each movement felt like something breaking inside him. Olivia took a shaky breath, desperately trying to hold back tears. I only wanted to help you both. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. The sound was so soft, so full of hurt, that Michael nearly collapsed. Every instinct in him screamed to move toward her, to cup her face in his hands, to tell her she was the only light that had entered that house in months. But he was afraid, truly afraid. It's not you, Olivia. It's not anything you did. It's just this process is ugly. And Claire will use anything against me, against us. She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening together. I know. I understand. It's just it hurts. It hurts because I care about him. And about you? Michael felt the floor disappear beneath him. He wanted to answer, to tell her what he felt, but he couldn't. The silence between them seemed alive, pulsing. From the living room, Mason called her name, unaware of the storm surrounding them. I'll get my things, Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. Michael opened his mouth to stop her, but nothing came out. He watched her walk to the guest room and gather her folder, her coat, her bag. Every movement was slow, heavy, as if she were saying goodbye to a place where she had left a piece of her heart. When she returned to the living room, Mason ran to her, gripping her arm tightly. Are you going to play with me today? Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, devastated. She knelt down and touched his face with heartbreaking tenderness. I'm going to miss you so much, champ. Are you coming back? The question, so small and so enormous, shattered something inside her. I hope I will, she whispered. She stood up slowly, her eyes finding Michael's one last time. For one silent second, everything they felt, everything they denied, hovered between them, exposed. But neither of them moved. Take care of him, Olivia said, her voice barely audible. Michael wanted to shout that he couldn't do it without her, that he needed her to breathe, to believe, to not drown completely. But the words died in his throat, crushed by the fear of losing his son. She walked to the door. He didn't have the courage to ask her to stay. When the door closed behind her, the house sank into a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the air. Mason ran into his room, calling for her until his voice broke. Michael leaned against the living room wall, sliding down to the floor, feeling loneliness tighten around him like a noose. She was gone. And for the first time since Claire had left him, the house felt even emptier. Because this time, he knew exactly what he had lost. The days away from Michael's house had become a quiet torment for Olivia. She tried to stick to a routine, but everything felt off. Coffee had no taste, work felt colder, and the city always full of movement now felt empty. The absence of Mason weighed on her chest like a guilt she wasn't sure she deserved. And Michael's absence, that was the one she tried not to think about. Tried, but failed, every single time she closed her eyes. On a cloudy Seattle morning, Olivia decided to walk to the cafe she used to frequent before working with the family. As she waited for her order, she heard a familiar voice behind her. It was Mrs. Robertson, Michael and Claire's former neighbor, a petite older woman with wavy gray hair and sharp eyes that always seemed to know more than she let on. Olivia, is that you, dear? She turned, forcing a surprised smile. Mrs. Robertson, it's been a while. The older woman walked over, leaning on her cane with effortless grace. I heard Claire went looking for Michael again. I didn't know you two were still in contact. Olivia hesitated. The fresh wound reopened, stinging. We're not. I don't work for him anymore. Mrs. Robertson's eyes narrowed with concern, Oh, darling. Don't tell me that woman managed to push you out too. That stopped Olivia cold. Too? Mrs. Robertson slipped her phone into her purse and sighed. Claire always had a very refined way of making herself the victim, but I know what she did before she left. A wave of curiosity and a strange sense of dread washed over Olivia. What do you mean? The woman looked around as if checking to see who might be listening. Then she leaned in. Claire didn't leave to figure out her life. She was drowning in debt. It happened fast: credit cards, loans, expenses she hid from Michael. I saw collectors knocking on their door with my own eyes. She left because she didn't want anyone to find out. The ground seemed to shift under Olivia's feet. That doesn't make sense, she whispered, trying to process the revelation. Mrs. Robertson nodded, adjusting her glasses. Of course it does. What do you think she wants now? It's not the boy. It's the money. If she gets custody, even part-time, she gets child support. She's desperate. Olivia's stomach turned. Claire's cold, calculated gaze returned to her mind accusations laced with lies. It had never been about love. It was about control. About manipulation. Michael doesn't know, the woman added, her tone darkening. And if he doesn't wake up soon, he might lose what he loves most. Olivia stood frozen, a knot forming in her chest, hot, painful, burning with indignation. Claire was tearing Michael apart again, and this time Mason too. All for greed, for pride, not for motherhood. The old woman touched her hand. You're a good one, Olivia. And I know you care about that boy, and that man too. Olivia's eyes widened, her face flushing. This isn't about me. It's about Mason. He doesn't deserve this. Then do something, Mrs. Robertson said, her voice sharp with clarity. If you know the truth, you can't stand by and do nothing. The words echoed through her like a bell ringing at the end of silence. When Olivia left the cafe, the cold wind bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. All she felt was the rising fury, the indignation, and above all, an unshakable sense of purpose. Michael had to know. Mason had to be protected. Even if the house was no longer hers, even if she had been forced to leave, even if her heart still ached every time she remembered Michael's eyes, silently begging her to understand something he couldn't say. She walked to the bus stop with firm steps. The bus came quickly, and she boarded with hands clenched in her lap, the passing landscape outside a blur that mirrored the chaos within. I can't stay still. I can't let them go through this alone. She no longer had a place in that home. No formal responsibility, but she had something stronger. A bond deeper than duty, something even Michael was afraid to name. When she got off the bus, the sky was heavy with rain clouds. But Olivia didn't care. She walked all the way to Michael's door, heart pounding, trembling not from cold, but from the certainty that this was the right thing to do. She stood there a moment, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell. For Mason and for him, even if she'd never have the courage to say it out loud. The morning of the hearing arrived shrouded in gray, heavy clouds, as if even the sky bore the weight that Michael carried in his chest. He sat on the bench reserved for the involved parties, dressed in a dark suit, tension etched into every line of his face, fingers clasped tightly together. Mason was beside him, fidgeting, clutching his teddy bear in both hands. The boy didn't fully understand, but he felt everything. Claire walked in with confident strides, wearing an elegant blazer and flawless makeup, doing her best to appear composed. But in her eyes was something else, a hidden unease, a fear masked by arrogance, visible only to those who dared to look deeper. Her lawyer adjusted his papers, self-assured. Michael's attorney placed a hand on his shoulder. Stay calm. Today will be different. But nothing could have prepared Michael for what happened when the courtroom doors opened once more. He heard it before he saw it. Soft footsteps, quick breaths, a presence he thought he had lost forever. When he turned his head, time stopped. Olivia walked into the room. She wore a simple navy blue blouse and black slacks, her blonde hair pulled back into a low bun, revealing the graceful curve of her neck and a face lit by quiet determination. Her expression was steady, but her eyes carried a mix of courage and vulnerability that took the air from Michael's lungs. His heart pounded so fiercely he had to steady himself against the bench. And before anyone could react, Mason saw her. He dropped his teddy bear and ran across the courtroom, calling out, "Olivia." The room went silent. He threw his arms around her legs, burying his face in her trousers. Olivia gently cradled his head, kneeling to hug him tightly. "Hey, I'm here, champ." "I'm here." The judge raised his brows, clearly intrigued. Claire went pale in an instant. There was no competing with the truth of that image. Michael watched with tear-filled eyes. It was as if life had finally clicked back into place. When Olivia stepped into the witness stand, keeping her hand on Mason's shoulder until the last second, Michael stood without realizing it. His heart ached and swelled all at once. Then, the testimony began. Olivia spoke with the same calm grace that had once soothed Mason. "Your Honor, Mason didn't just trust me. He opened up to me." He smiled again. "I saw his fear, his trauma, and I saw Michael fight day after day to heal the emotional wounds left by his mother's absence." Claire clenched her fists but didn't interrupt. Olivia took a deep breath. "And I discovered something I couldn't ignore. Claire didn't come back out of love for her son. She came back for money." Gasps filled the courtroom. Claire's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised his hand for silence. Then, Mrs. Robertson was called to testify. With calm precision, the elderly woman recounted the debt collectors, the hushed arguments, the suspicious activity before Claire's departure. Her words were sharp, lived in, irrefutable. Claire's mask crumbled, her arrogance turning to panic. And finally, the judge leaned back in his chair to deliver the verdict. For the emotional stability, safety, and well-being of the child, custody will remain with the father. Claire, you will have supervised visitation. This court will not allow manipulative tactics for personal gain. Michael closed his eyes tightly, a wave of relief rushing through him like new air in suffocating lungs. Mason hugged his father's legs, smiling, not fully understanding, but feeling safe. Claire left in defeat, never once looking back. And then, silence, but not the same kind. This silence was full of possibility. As the room cleared, Michael remained seated, unmoving, until Olivia slowly approached. She hesitated, as if unsure she had the right to take another step. I only did what was right," she murmured. Michael took a deep breath and walked to her. When he stood before her, he could no longer hold back the tears. He cupped her face gently, afraid to break something precious. His eyes shone with all he had been holding back for weeks. "I missed you more than I should have." Olivia closed her eyes, overcome. A single tear slid down her cheek, and he brushed it away with his thumb. "I never really left," she whispered. "Not for a second." He pulled her into his arms, and she held him like it was the only place she was safe. Their embrace was deep, filled with pain, longing, gratitude, and all the emotions they had been forced to silence. From a distance, Mason watched them, teddy bear in hand. And slowly, a small smile formed on his face. For the first time, he seemed to understand. This was good. This was right. Michael held Olivia tighter, breathing in the scent of her hair like someone who had finally surfaced after drowning. It was reconciliation, It was redemption. It was love, growing in the ruins, and nothing would break it again. The courtroom door had closed behind them, but for the first time in a long time, life felt open. Michael and Olivia walked out slowly, as if afraid that any sudden movement might shatter the fragile balance they had just reclaimed. The afternoon was cold, typical of Seattle, with a light wind stirring Olivia's loose hair. Michael stopped on the sidewalk and looked at her for a long moment, trying to memorize everything, her eyes still shimmering with emotion, her cheeks flushed, her breathing somehow syncing with his own. Mason held Olivia's hand, smiling that special smile he reserved only for her. He looked at his father, silently asking for permission to keep holding on. Michael nodded, heart brimming with a tenderness that nearly undid him. In the days that followed, Michael's home regained a glow that had been stripped from it long ago. Each morning, Olivia arrived early, always with a soft smile and a quiet greeting that warmed the entire space. She never pushed, never forced intimacy. She respected his pace, Mason's pace, and silently her own healing heart. One evening, while Mason slept, Michael made tea in the kitchen. Olivia leaned against the counter, watching the steam rise from the mugs, wrapped in a light coat, her hair cascading in soft waves. The golden light made everything feel intimate, hushed. He handed her a cup. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did for us." She held the cup, blowing gently on the surface, and replied in a low voice, "I didn't do it out of obligation. I did it because you two became part of me." The confession left Michael speechless. He stepped closer, resting against the counter beside her. "I'm afraid of ruining this, of moving too fast, of you thinking I'm just trying to fill a void." Olivia looked up, steady but soft. "Michael, I don't want fast. I want real. I want to walk beside you without being afraid to look back." His heart warmed in a way that didn't hurt this time. He reached out slowly and brushed his fingers against hers. "Then let's take it slow, the right way." By the end of that week, on a Saturday touched by shy sunlight, Michael took Olivia and Mason to the park. The boy ran through the grass, laughing, kicking a small ball. Olivia watched him with a smile full of wonder. Michael, meanwhile, watched her more than he watched his own son, unashamed of his vulnerability. "He's different, isn't he?" she said. Michael nodded. "You brought life back into him." She shook her head, moving closer. "He just needed to feel safe, and his safety, it was always you." He looked down, overwhelmed. And when he looked back up, she was there, not hesitating. He took her hand gently, lacing their fingers. Olivia didn't pull away. She stepped forward, resting her forehead against his. "I'm here," she whispered. He closed his eyes, soaking in the moment like something sacred. "And I want you to stay." She smiled against his skin. "Then I will." Their relationship began like that, in small steps, quiet dinners, long conversations on the couch after Mason fell asleep. No rush, no pressure. Just two hearts learning to breathe together after being suffocated for far too long. Mason flourished. He drew with more joy, laughed more easily, and slept hugging his teddy bear without fear of nightmares. And every time he ran into Olivia's arms, Michael knew he had found something rare. Their love wasn't built on perfection. It wasn't born in picture-perfect moments. It grew from the cracks, from the pain, the scars they carried and didn't try to hide. It was forged in the honest talks about fear, in the exposed vulnerabilities, in the courage to try again. One night, as Olivia picked up toys in the living room, Michael wrapped his arms around her from behind. She smiled, tilting her head to rest on his shoulder. "I thought I'd never have a family again," he whispered. She turned and touched his face, so softly it felt like a caress on his soul. Family isn't who stays only in the good moments, it's who chooses to stay. Even when everything hurts. Michael kissed her. A slow, tender kiss, full of care and truth. No rush, no fear, just surrender. From the hallway, Mason watched with his teddy bear in hand, smiling before turning back toward his room. For the first time, he had everything he never knew was missing. Love didn't erase their past, but it taught them how to turn pain into strength, loss into renewal, fear into courage. And so, through laughter, through vulnerability, and through small but powerful victories, Michael, Olivia, and Mason built a home that wasn't perfect. It was real, and that realness, full of truth and affection, was what finally healed what had once been broken. And now, I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of this emotional story filled with twists, healing, and hope? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments below and let me know how much this touched your heart. Like it if this story moved you. Share it with someone who loves a good story too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters. Before you go, I've selected another story, even more intense, deep, and emotional, prepared especially for you. I'm sure it's going to move you even more. Want to discover it?